Hello. It's good to be streaming again. It's been a minute. I want to do today a focus on body dysmorphia and kind of highlighting the similarities that there are between body dysmorphia and what is often referred to as dysphoria, because I think that there's a lot of overlap there. Um, and yeah, I'm just gonna dive right in. And if you want to talk in the stream, hey Michelle, um, you can go ahead and chat. At the end of this video, I am going to sort of give I guess a sort of not a guided meditation exactly, but sort of some activities that help with relief from body dysmorphia related anxieties. So, sort of grounding work that we can all do to help us with that. Because I think one of the main things that really brought me out of the mindset of thinking I was trans was when I started speaking to women and found all women have some sort of discomfort with our bodies. And that can go as far as our being overly sexualized in society is a real blatant one. But then also, growing up with maybe eating disorders or a negative self image that was sort of hereditary in a way, where we didn't have female role models that ensured positive reinforcement of our self image. So I'm going to share a document, and I've listed the source in the description, and you are free to go and download and read the PDF that I'll be sharing here. It's free to use. It is provided by Australia. I forget the name now off the top of my head, but it's kind of their center for mental health. So let me share my screen. Okay. So the packet is called Building Body Acceptance. And it's a very long packet. There's, I think that there's 12 modules in total, and the modules are several pages long. So I'm not going to cover every single one. But again, I really recommend that you go and find this on your own and read further if this is something that you find helpful. So, an introduction to body dysmorphia and what is body image and body dysmorphia. Here we are, the Center for Clinical Interventions. Are you a person who finds that you spend a great deal of time focused on a particular aspect of your appearance? Do you view a particular part of your body as seriously flawed in some way? Have you noticed that your efforts to improve or hide the area of concern from others is becoming time-consuming and affecting your life in a negative way? Do you have trouble believing others when they tell you that you look fine? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you may be experiencing a problem called body dysmorphic disorder, and you may want to keep reading these Building Body Acceptance modules. The aim of this current module is to provide you with some general information about body image and body dysmorphic disorder, to consider how this problem might develop, and to discuss some of its negative consequences. In later modules, we will discuss how you can overcome this problem. So, we all have moments of self-doubt, and to a certain extent, that is a healthy response. It's us recalibrating to our social circumstances. But when it goes so far as impacting your life consistently in a negative way, it's something that might need further evaluation. And I think One thing that really pops into my head is how much time women tend to spend on makeup and doing their hair and getting ready for the day. I have talked before about how I used to use makeup every single day for any kind of event. It did not matter to me if the event I was going to was formal or casual. I wore a full face of makeup with foundation and all sorts of things. And it took a long time. Took a lot of my personal time away from me to do that action, which was me trying to, again, calibrate and adjust myself to a level that I felt the world expected of me. And that's partly our society impacting that norm on women, but also it's something that can come from ourselves. And I think it's important to start first with ourselves because we have more control over that. So, analyzing how many times a day are you thinking about how others view you, and what are you doing or limiting yourself to do um, because of these presumed judgments that you're expecting from other people. Something that's very common in the trans community is, being affirmed and being validated, right, based on appearance. And I find that it's really the two things side by side, this trans notion of gender affirmation and then this notion of like self-imposed misogyny or self-inflicted and internalized misogyny. They really compare pretty similarly because on the one side of the spectrum, you're trying to alter your body and appearance to make you seem like an accepted male. But on the other side, you're trying to alter your appearance to be an accepted female. And in both those cases, you are causing yourself potentially health problems and bodily harm, as well as impacting your day-to-day time management and taking away from your finances as well. We talk about how, women have less money to pour into these things, and yet we are the ones who are encouraged to spend small fortunes on getting our hair done, getting our nails done, doing makeup, and purchasing all sorts of things to repair our skin from the makeup. Because that's a cyclical thing where, if you're doing this unnatural thing to your skin's going to react. And it's usually not going to be very happy about it. So bearing in mind that both of those, women coming from both of those experiences can, I think, have a negative self-image. And it can just materialize in different ways, is interesting and needs to be talked about a little bit. So I kind of went over this about body image. And it's important to acknowledge that we have our own perception of our body, and then others have their perception of our body, and they're not going to line up exactly the same. A great example of this is if you've ever left an outgoing voicemail message to those who might call you and leave a message, and then you go to check your messages and you hear your own voice. I bet it sounds different to you. And that's because our brain and where our ears are and all of that business is different, and it alters the way that we hear ourselves. And similarly, when we go to look in the mirror, we can see a different thing looking back at us depending on a lot of variables. So if we're going into that already expecting a negative image, we're going to find all of those things that we consider flaws as soon as we look in that mirror. But if we are able to go into that looking at ourselves with a positive self-image, or even a neutral self-image, we might not have opportunity to see as many of those negative aspects, or those things that we would deem negative, right? So I'm going to scroll down here. What is body dysmorphic disorder? Many people can have a poor body image, seeing their general physical appearance in a negative light. Example, I hate my body. However, the term body dysmorphic disorder, or BDD, is used to describe a particular, more specific type of body image problem. BDD is marked by an intense preoccupation with a perceived flaw in one's physical appearance. Individuals with BDD often spend significant periods of time worrying about and evaluating a particular aspect of their appearance. Large amounts of time may be spent checking their appearance in the mirror, comparing their appearance with others, and engaging in behaviors designed to try to hide or conceal the area of concern. Now, anyone who has had any experience with the trans community on social media has seen one of those pictures of, a trans-identified man or a trans-identified woman saying, please tell me that you're seeing such and such image. And it's very, very straightforward. And the concerning thing for me is that they don't acknowledge that that's not normal. It's not normal, and it's not a healthy thing to consistently need validation from others to feel okay with yourself. And we could argue the legitimacy of if they are doing it because they actually need that validation, or if they're doing it because it's a trend. I think it's hard to differentiate. But I do think that for women who are on TikTok or on YouTube or other social medias, who are constantly pouring out photos of themselves, whether this is a trans-identified woman or not, we're kind of roped into this cycle of I need validation to keep me going and to keep this body image going. But then your tool set for being able to do that yourself starts to diminish, because you are not working on it yourself. You're delegating that to someone else, which also gives them the power of dictating your mood, right? And your reaction. Because you are handing over the opportunity to say, you can assign me value. And that's really detrimental to mental health, is to give someone else the power to value you as a person. And I've done it plenty of times, and I still do it to some degree. There's still times when I worry or change a habit, or overcorrect myself in certain ways in order to be perceived in a certain light. The problem is when it's consistent and persistent, and when it's done subconsciously, when you're not even aware that you're doing it anymore, when you're not able to look back at what you just did or said and see, oh, I wasn't being my true self in that moment because I felt I needed to change in order to be perceived in a different way. And again, some of that is evolutionary, right? Some of that is because we need to adapt to the group circumstance so that we can move through the group without being othered, because being othered is not always good. So some of that is bound to happen in our lives, but when it's consistent, when it's persistent, when it's taking away from your quality of life, that's when it's a problem. While the preoccupation may be with a body part or any body part, and can change over time. The most common areas that people with BDD report as being problematic include skin, including acne, wrinkles, or complexion, thinning or excessive hair on the head or body, nose size or shape, eyes or eyebrows, lips, smile, teeth, or mouth, cheeks, chin, or jaw, ears, overall face shape, leg size or calves, genitals, breasts, buttocks, stomach, arms, neck, scars, height, muscles / build. If you spend any time in the detrans subreddit, as an example, there's a lot of young women when they start to detransition who are trying to find a new way to maneuver through the world. And it is harder. And I don't want to negate the fact that we do live in a society where there are expectations, and it makes it a lot easier to move in this society if you meet some of those expectations. That being said, there is this hyperfixation that a lot of us have. And I think a lot of us, I don't know if we go into transition with this hyperfixation already in place. I think some of it is present because we see, a lot of women go into transition with disordered eating habits and obsessive compulsive disorder habits. And sometimes are diagnosed with those things, sometimes are not, and then are diagnosed later or what have you. But when you hyperfixate on this thing, which you are encouraged to do in the trans community, you are constantly thinking about it. You're constantly thinking, do I look enough like a man? Or do I look queer? Or do I look, like X gender, X sexuality? And this hyperfixation is fed by both positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. So we might get a response that says, you're obviously a woman because you are 5'3". And and you have feminine qualities and characteristics about you. And in response to that, the hyperfixation kicks in and says, okay, so these are things that I need to change about myself. I need to change my height. I need to change my characteristics. I need to go in and dig deep and find the ways that I am portraying something that I don't want to be portrayed as. And the root of that is, why do you not want to be portrayed as that thing? And why do you want to be portrayed as something else? And how much of yourself are you sacrificing to fit into those expectations? Because a lot of times with transition, fitting into those expectations requires us to hurt ourselves, and not just cosmetically, but in very permanent ways, right? So, but we're not taking that into account. The hyperfixation is in charge, and I think that's something that takes part in why a lot of people come across as ignorant when they say, well, you should have known better. You should have known that this would cause you permanent damage. We're not thinking clearly when this happens. Oh, Kiyoshi, I'm glad that you're here for this. It's something that we all kind of struggle with, right? I think all women deal with this to certain degrees, but especially if you've been through transition, or if you've had disordered eating habits, or extreme obsessive compulsive disorder habits, those I think really make you take a beating from yourself, basically, because you are causing yourself extreme damage. in order to fit into these expectations that you've built up for yourself. But as I was saying, the hyperfixation is in charge. So when I was speaking to a doctor about taking anabolic steroids, I was not thinking long term. And a part of that is, of course, the whole, you're going to kill yourself if you don't take this drug mantra that they speak about. But a part of that is also that I'm thinking about the right now. I need to fix this right now. I need to change this right now because I need to have control. Just like with obsessive compulsive disorder and with disordered eating habits, there is a reaction to a lack of control. And I'm not trying to boil anything down here. I understand that there are more complex and specific things involved in both of those that are not related to each other. However, the relationship I find is that you a major trigger, if you will, for these things coming out as a reaction is a lack of control in your personal life. And that can be real or perceived lack of control, right? And so if you have a young woman who feels like she is constantly sexually objectified by the world, she's going to want to find a way to control that. A way to control that she might find is by controlling her body. And a way she can control her body is to change it in her mind. The methodology of, oh, hey, Cass, the methodology of changing your body in order to fit this need for control and this expectation that couples with it is really dangerous. So, some of these things listed here, breast size. There are women who have gotten synthetic implants for breasts and have died from those surgeries. And sometimes, it's a compulsion that we can see very visibly when someone is consistently needing to follow that high of changing their body, right? We've seen people who we would casually say they're addicted to cosmetic surgery. But I would venture to say that I don't know if it's an addiction exactly, but it's a compulsion. I'm going to take a sip of my drink here. As I'm discussing things that are exceptionally healthy and unhealthy, I am chugging down some unhealthy aspartame. So, individuals with BDD are often concerned that the body part is too big or too small, not the right shape, asymmetrical, or out of proportion to the rest of their body. In BDD, usually the actual flaw a person is worrying about is so slight that others do not really notice or consider it important. Now, that is a difference between body dysmorphic disorder and trans ideation or being in that mindset, right? Because it's one thing to say that a woman who is overly concerned about a few crow's feet, that's something that people will probably not notice, right? Like people will probably, even if they do notice, it's not something that they're going to judge you on or make any predictions about your personality based on that, right? However, if you are transitioning, that's a very obvious difference. That's something that we all inherently know. We all inherently know the sex of somebody. when we see them. I mean, arguably maybe less so today because God knows there's tons of surgeries. But my point being that it's very easy to distinguish a female who is first starting to try to look male versus a woman who has a little bit of crow's feet. And we're talking, we might have a prejudgment of somebody. And I say that not in terms of a negative or a positive prejudgment, but we will have preconceived notions of somebody who is in the process of transition. We can see it, we can tell, we know. And it goes the same way for detrans women as well. So many of us who medically did some form of transition, we often get asked, what are your pronouns? Well, I'm the only one in the room that you ask pronouns about. And the reason for that is because I have a distinctly different voice and because I have a distinctly different fat distribution. It's somewhat back to normal, but people are still going to ask because they can tell something is different about me. And the resolution, which we'll get to eventually, is I can choose in that situation. Am I going to take that as a personal affliction? Am I going to take that as a personal assault on my character, that this person notices that my body is somewhat different? Or am I going to take that on the surface and say, it does not define my character. It does not define my personhood. And what they see is what they see, and they are allowed to see that and acknowledge that. And I am allowed to counteract that if I so choose and say, well, I have these bodily changes because of this. But, they are allowed to observe what they are allowed to observe. And we can't really impose the expectations, that the outrageous expectations that we have for ourselves, right, on others. That's when it starts to get into kind of like the brainwashing territory, right, of, or coercion is more accurate to say, that I have these unrealistic expectations and see myself in a non-factual way. And I see myself as some fantasy. So you now must see me as this fantasy, even if that's not really what's in front of you. Because that's just you're basically trying to make your need for control over yourself into an umbrella of control over everyone's perception of you. And that's not fair. It's dangerous. It's delusional thinking, but I digress. Hey, Miranda. Hey, ONC. So here's one example. While BDD may present in many different ways, take a moment to consider the following two case examples. Jane is a 36-year-old woman who attended her GP, general practitioner, complaining of depressed mood. Upon further questioning, it was found that over the past few years, Jane has slowly withdrawn from her friends and often refuses to leave the house due to what she describes as her, quote, hideous, end quote, looks. Jane feels that the lines around her eyes make her look much older than she is, and she worries that others will notice this and be repulsed by her advanced aging. Jane frequently checks her lines in the mirror and applies eye cream approximately once per hour. She will not go to the shops to buy groceries unless she has carefully applied makeup and styled her hair forward to conceal the lines around her eyes as much as possible. Jane has been spending what little money she has on trips to the beauty salon and expensive creams. She says that the main reason she is depressed is because she cannot afford the plastic surgery that she knows would fix this problem. When Jane's GP told her that her lines were very faint, barely noticeable, and more than appropriate for her age. Jane said she knew he was just being kind and asked if he knew of any new treatments that could help her with this problem. So this is a very common thing, aging. I was at the pharmacy about an hour ago, and I was trying to find just a simple moisturizer with some SPF, some sunscreen in it. And everything that I was finding was anti-aging and, resolve the wrinkles around your eyes kind of thing. And it's so disheartening to think that these perfectly natural things that are happening with my skin, just because time has passed, that's something that I'm encouraged by this industry to hide. Yep, it's true. You don't find that in men's creams or lotions. I mean, there's not a whole market developed for men to get rid of their saggy or baggy eyes, right? I mean, I would argue it's probably going to happen. The way that we are becoming more superficial, and the way that men are encouraging each other to beautify themselves for their own AGP related things. I can see it happening, but definitely not in the way that it's happened to women for ages. For ages. And, this goes into ageism and misogyny being just very good friends. And that could be a whole topic on its own, honestly, is the detriment of how women are treated in society once they reach a certain age. So in this documentation, they refer to what I call hyperfixation. They refer to it as preoccupation. I would argue, I don't know. I like to call it hyperfixation because I feel like there really is this need to fixate. Like it's somehow rewarding in the brain to find your flaws. It's hard to describe for those who have not felt it really strongly. But for anyone who has had any exposure to disordered eating, whether in your own life or in someone else's, you can see how that, what they call preoccupation, what I call hyperfixation, is a drive, right? It blocks everything out that's logical, everything that's healthy and that is fit for your existence to continue. It blocks out all of that and focuses it onto this one little point. And if you can fix that one little thing, you get this rush of relief. But then it comes back over and over again. At the heart of BDD is a fairly specific negative body image. That one tries to manage via various behaviors that are intended to improve things, but often backfire and make things worse. From now on, we will use the term negative body image to refer to the perceived flaws in your appearance that seem to preoccupy you the most. We have settled on this term because it is likely at this early stage you believe that the body image you hold is very much accurate and in tune with how you really look. So if you've ever received a compliment and your response was, "Oh no, you're being so sweet," or "Oh, stop it, yeah, I look a mess." That's female conditioning right there, and that negative body image um, has been instilled in us since girlhood, right? It's something that is prevalent in our society. And I would argue it's becoming more and more common that we impose these things on girls from a younger and younger age. And it's less so, I think it's less so that we impose something like, this girl is pretty. Um, how do I word this? And it's more sexualized, you know? Um, our standards have changed to become much more sexualized from a younger age. Um, and that can create a negative body image too, because you're a young girl, you're not supposed to be sexy. um, it's completely inappropriate for that to be the body image that others see on you. Um, but regardless, that's kind of what we are implementing in our society more frequently, I think. Cass has a really good comment here. It doesn't help that when we acknowledge we think we look good, that we're labeled as narcissists or vain. This is true. Um, I, uh, I am kind of like on this mission of always saying, like, I am still a beautiful, like, attractive woman, even though I am detransitioned. Um, and I've gotten comments before that were like, "You're just very full of yourself," and I'm like, "I'm not. I'm just stating the fact that I'm very attractive." And context matters, of course. I'm not just going to go around saying that all the time, because that might be a bit much. But just acknowledging, like, I am an attractive person, or I feel I look good. It's seen as arrogance. It's seen as us being vain. Um, we're sort of supposed to always be, looking for that external validation. Um, and again, that's handing the power over to somebody else and saying, you get to value me. You get to determine what value I hold in society based on what you see. Not this, not talking, not thinking, not getting to know me. It's just on this. So here is a checklist that I found pretty helpful. And as I was going through this checklist, I had to work on being truthful, because I wanted to pretend like I was past a lot of these things, because I see myself as a feminist and I want to be better than that, like better than what these problems are. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of this is still very much stuck in my brain. And so I had to sort of fight myself and say, okay, no, answer this honestly. Like, do you still care about your weight and your eating habits? Absolutely. Things like that. So this is an interesting checklist. I'll leave it there for a moment so you can take a look. Uh, I use cosmetics, clothing, or other means to camouflage aspects of my appearance. I see this all the time with younger detransitioned women and assisted women. A lot of overlap there between young women who are, or I should say among, because I'm including several here, detrans women who are younger, um, women who are younger who have disordered eating, and women who are younger who are transitioning. And they all have, I'm doing broad strokes here, but I have seen in all of these communities, pretty frequently, these women will go through at least periods of time where they will wear lots of baggy clothes and try to hide their bodies. Um, and part of that is due to their negative self-image, and part of that is also due to not wanting to be sexually objectified, right? They're trying to hide the parts of themselves that they have noticed are objectified the most. So they're trying to hide from that. And it's difficult to separate those two things, I think, because when you hide from it, you're still kind of making yourself a servant to that external validation, even if it's a lack of reaction from that external source. You're changing yourself. You're hiding yourself, right? I ask others whether I look okay, or I try to convince them how bad I look. Could also be I ask others if I look male or masculine. Um, you know, I ask people what they think my pronouns are as a sort of trap. And again, negative reinforcement is still reinforcement here, because you're still feeding that compulsion. Um, and then there's some parts here where you can fill this out. And I'm going to move to, I believe this is the second module. Yes. And I'm going to skip down from the top here to this section. In BDD, the types of experiences that have likely shaped your appearance assumptions are those we have already discussed in Module 1, page 7. So, seeing others around you with a body image or anxiety problem, physical changes during adolescence, a change in your appearance at any time of life, negative comments, bullying, teasing, social, cultural pressures. It's quite obvious from the outside that if you're surrounding yourself with people who are also anxious about their body image, that you're going to internalize that and then reflect it back. So you're keeping the cycle going amongst your own community. And that's something women do in circles, as well as women who are transitioning. Common unhelpful appearance assumptions linked to BDD may include: if people see the real me, then they will be repulsed. If I blend in, then others will accept me. If I can see the problem, then everyone else must be noticing it too. If I relax my standards, then I will let myself go. If I don't change my appearance, then I will never be happy. That one right there, that is the crux of what transitioning is all about, right? This ideal person that you are wanting to be, this expectation that's unrealistic and that's encouraged by not only your friends and sometimes your family, but also by clinicians, which begs the question, how do we have this and then also have gender dysphoria as a different thing? If I don't look perfect, then I look awful. If I stand out, then I will be ridiculed. If I am ugly, then I have no value. If I look attractive, then I will be successful in life. It's also extremely important in trans circles that you not only are transitioning and presenting yourself to be a certain way. If you're a man, you're going to be transitioning to look more traditionally feminine. If you are a woman, then you are going to be transitioning to look more traditionally like a man. Or another option for those two is to look queer, right? We've seen that pop up as a sort of response to it too, of I'm never going to fit in. I look queer, whatever that means to my immediate community. So I'm going to embrace it, and make that part of my personality. But regardless of anything, any of those three things, you need to strive for attractiveness. The really devastating thing that we've seen recently in social media with regards to one trans-identified woman, is that you don't always come out very attractive when you start medically transitioning. You know, especially if you are a woman and you are transitioning, your odds of coming out looking what you expect to look like is just totally off the charts. It's not going to happen. It's not. And it's kind of a painful thing that you have to accept, is that, you might come out of it not only with extreme health issues, but also your appearance is going to not be what you want it to be. And then that's going to feed into your need, your compulsion to correct that, what you see as a flaw, right? So one great example is acne. If you are a trans-identified woman and you are constantly trying to present as this, like, cute emo boy, and you're riddled with, cystic acne, that's going to be difficult for you to get out of that negative body image mentality, because you have now this new thing that you are having to address. But you then become dependent on the thing that you have to address and have to correct. And it becomes another aspect that you can hyperfixate on. Appearance assumptions play a central role in BDD. Many people can be dissatisfied with their appearance, and many people can have a poor body image. But holding unhelpful appearance assumptions are what generate the more extreme body image problems seen in BDD. Think of it this way. Someone can have a negative body image that, quote, I have a huge nose, end quote. But it is only going to cause them significant distress and problems in their life if they also hold an appearance assumption like, quote, if I don't look perfect, others will reject me, end quote. Conversely, their negative body image probably wouldn't cause them great distress if they held the more flexible and realistic appearance assumption that, quote, it's okay to not look perfect, end quote. Appearance assumptions are the key difference between someone who says, quote, I have a huge nose, but it's not that important, end quote, versus someone who says, quote, I have a huge nose and should hide away from people, end quote. So here it lists some of the triggers. I'm not sure what my bird is doing. Direct negative comments. So, if you're in school getting bullied, that could be one. Hi, Myron. Perceived or actual rejection by others. This is a huge one in the trans community. Because as we see with young men who are transitioning, they have this perception that if they are not seen a certain way, it's rejection. But what they see in the mirror after they've donned a wig and wear what they wear is very different than what others see. And they then try to, again, delegate out that control, that coercion. Women are a little bit different. Women who are transitioning are a little bit different. Their perception is usually more negative. It's more that they feel rejection. How do I put this? They feel like they are not doing enough work on themselves versus the men who are transitioning. They feel like they have achieved this perceived look, but then they have a perceived rejection of the look. Even though in their minds they have built it up as they've accomplished the ideal look that they want. But in both those situations, this perceived or actual rejection is taken as a rejection of character versus a rejection of looks or a rejection of body or a rejection of, it's taken as a rejection of the whole instead of a rejection of this or that. And also, rejection is not the end of the world. No one is entitled to be accepted by everyone. It's hard to acknowledge this, but there are people who are not going to accept you, or are not going to dote on you or love you as you are or what have you. And that's okay. Not everyone can like you. Just like you might not like everyone you meet. And it's important to not internalize that as I need to alter my body more. I need to have more control over my body, and then others will like me. And if others like me, then that is affirmation that I am doing something right. When in fact, they may not even know how much you're sacrificing of your own health and your own existence and time and money to fit into what you are just assuming their expectations of you are. Because more often than not, once you're out of like middle school and high school, people are not going to directly tell you what they don't like about you. They're more likely just going to say they don't like you or that they don't want to spend time with you. They're not going to say, I don't like you because your hair is ugly. That's not very common. And most people are able to move past looks and see someone's character and decide on character if they are not going to like you. And character is something that you can change in a healthy way. But your looks, changing your looks to gain someone's approval, is not a healthy relationship from the start. Seeing an unflattering photograph or image of yourself in a reflective surface, and exposure to attractive people. These two things are very relatable to each other because we have, fucking Instagram, and, you'll see these influencers on there who have professional equipment. Usually they have professional photographer, and they have a whole setup. And then they're able to take these very polished and edited photos. And then you go on Instagram and try to take a picture by yourself with no additional lighting and what have you. And there's all these filters and all these ways you can edit it that you can make it look a little more polished, but still it's going to be hard to achieve the same level of editing and polishedness as the influencer. So you're comparing yourself to an impossible expectation again. because you are exposed to this person who has this very curated image that they're able to produce. And you're saying, why can't I produce that? Well, you don't have the means to produce it. That person does not actually look like that. That is again, a curated image. That is a special image that has been doctored to high heaven to look that way. It's not realistic. All right. What keeps BDD going? Appearance preoccupation. It is a common human experience that when we are confronted with a difficult or threatening situation, we often find it hard to shift our attention away from that threat. This is actually a very useful part of our survival response. After all, if you are confronted with a real threat, example, a snake, you want your attention to focus in on and evaluate that threat, and for your mind to come up with a range of solutions to the problem. Example, how to get away from the snake safely. Unfortunately, many people who experience BDD report great difficulty shifting their attention away from thoughts about their appearance. This makes sense given people with BDD believe that there is something wrong, a threat, with their appearance. Just like in the snake example above, their attention therefore focuses on the area of concern, and they begin to evaluate and mentally search for solutions to the problem with their appearance. Unfortunately, until they feel that the threat is resolved, which rarely seems to occur, these distressing thoughts will continue. So that's where anxiety starts to set in. So you you develop some wrinkles and you start to become very insecure in your body image. And then you start to develop, or I guess you start to rely more on unattainable expectations of how you should be looking. Then the so-called flaw that you see, these wrinkles are accentuated in your mind's eye. When you see yourself, you see the wrinkles first. That causes anxiety and distress because how do you fix that problem? And then you're going to go and try to find a solution to it. Well, solution to it is, going to be costing you money, costing you health. Are those things healthy to do? Is it a good option to go after these marketed solutions, or is it better to find a way to minimize the distress and acknowledge that it's okay to not look like this unattainable image that you have in your mind? People with BDD also frequently report a range of distressing mental images regarding their appearance, which replay over and over in their minds. Regardless of the type of preoccupation you are experiencing, time spent churning over these negative thoughts about your appearance can be very distressing. Individuals with BDD often report high levels of depression, anxiety, and feelings of disgust when thinking about their appearance. The preoccupation and negative thinking, whilst in some ways is an attempt to find a solution to your negative body image, in the end, it just serves to strengthen your negative body image and often promotes the unhelpful behaviors you engage in as a way of managing your appearance. So there is something called Dermo Dermatillomania, I believe. And that is a condition where you are a skin picker. A lot of people consider it really disgusting because it can expose you to infection and leave scars and what have you. But it is the compulsion to pick away at flaws that you see in your skin. So if you have a scab, if you have a hangnail, if you have a zit, you are going to feel this compulsion to pick at it. And that compulsion is extremely, extremely strong. It is something that when you are doing it, you might even have less of a conscious action in it. You might do it relatively automatically and not realize that you're doing it. It gets to a point where people with this condition trim their nails, They get rid of nail clippers and tools that they would normally use to pick at their skin with. They do develop infections. Sometimes they develop serious infections and end up with serious health consequences because of it. Regardless, the compulsion is there. And it's a really strange thing that we can develop these psychological compulsions to hurt ourselves, essentially. And it's not an intended way of self-harming, but it is still self-harming. Right, I'm gonna go back up to the top. Checking and reassurance seeking. To check on or ask for reassurance about things we are worried about is a normal human behavior. Most people have thought to themselves, quote, "I'm not sure I locked the door properly," end quote, and have walked back and checked or even asked a companion, quote, "Did I lock the door when we left?" End quote. Usually this will lead to us feeling less worried and allow us to continue with our everyday lives. In terms of our appearance, many people check how they look in the mirror, and some people will ask for advice from others as to whether an outfit looks, quote, "okay," end quote, before heading out. However, due to their excessive questioning, worry, and self-criticism about their appearance, people with BDD often find themselves engaging in high levels of mirror checking, comparing themselves with others, and reassurance-seeking behaviors. These behaviors may be done to see if the, quote, "defect," end quote, is still there, see if it has worsened, or see if it is as bad as first thought. People with BDD have reported engaging in frequent and repeated mirror gazing, including using mirrors that magnify, checking their appearance in reflective surfaces, example, shop windows, checking areas of their body visually by touch or by mentally scanning that area, verifying their appearance by taking a photograph or video footage of themselves, measuring parts of their body, example, using tape measure or calipers, making comparisons, example, by looking at old photographs of themselves or comparing their own appearance with that of others, and asking family members, friends, and professionals about their appearance, either to reassure themselves that their appearance is okay or to reassure themselves that there is a real problem by convincing others of the defect. That's a real big one too that is common for women who transition, is convincing others of a defect. And when you're in the trans community, that is sort of a group effort where one person might be waffling over, should I get a mastectomy or not? And then others in the group, in order to justify in their minds that they need the mastectomy, will say, well, of course you do too, because we have similar bodies. And so that's not only affirming that that person who isn't sure about it, that they need it, quote, need this surgery, but then also the person who is doing the encouraging is able to say, yeah, well, if that person needs it, then I need it too. And, I feel like I need it. And it's a back and forth, right? So, negative predictions. In general, people with BDD will often make a range of negative predictions about how others will perceive them in social situations. They tend to overestimate the likelihood that others will respond to their appearance in a negative manner, underestimate their ability to cope if this did occur, and discount any information that suggests that things will not be as bad as they predicted. For example, overlooking the many times they have been to social events where no one has made a negative comment regarding their appearance, or where they may have even been complimented. So this is the, if I get misgendered, I'll die kind of reaction, right? It's sort of catastrophizing situations and exaggerating the negativity that you might interpret from someone's comment or lack of comment. This person didn't use pronouns around me. That must mean that they don't really see me as a man. Well, for one, no, they don't. And for two, that's okay. They don't have to. Because you're not. Avoidance and safety behaviors. Strategies to protect you from experiencing anxiety and potentially negative incidents. People who experience BDD may avoid a large range of potential people, places, or situations where they feel their appearance may come into question by others, or where they feel they will be reminded of their distressing appearance flaws. To name a few, these can include excessive avoidance of social situations, dating, attractive people, mirrors, looking at yourself in photographs, or attending appointments, example, hairdressers, beauticians. Avoidance can also have a payoff in the short term because there are fewer reminders of your appearance flaws, fewer chances of being evaluated badly by others, and therefore, at times, less worry and concern. However, in the longer term, avoidance keeps your fears going and can even make them worse. By avoiding, you never have the opportunity to test your belief that your appearance is seriously flawed and that bad things will result from this that you cannot cope with. You never get to find out whether this belief is really true or you just think it's true. And so your fears live on. So, unfortunately, in this situation, no news is bad news. There's positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. There's also just neutral reinforcement of if I'm not getting any response from anyone because I'm avoiding them, then I can make up the truth in my own mind. So I am going to stop sharing, but I want to leave on a note that I think it's important for us to remind ourselves that it's okay to not be attractive. It's okay to not meet social standards. It's okay to not fit into those standards. And that character is where the quality is. How our bodies age, how our bodies look after medically transitioning. Those are things that we really don't have very much control over. And even if we did, the process is happening for a reason. And instead of perpetuating the issue by trying to fight it, we can learn to let go. So I'd encourage you to find a part of your body that maybe you avoid thinking about. Maybe you avoid seeing it when you look in the mirror or when you walk by a shop window because it's something that you kind of consider a flaw of yourself. And find why it's happening, find a use for it. Even if there is no health benefit to it happening, such as like wrinkles happening, it's happening for a reason. And it's okay that it's happening. Your body is taking care of you. Your body is moving you throughout the world. And the more that we can show these parts of our bodies that we're uncomfortable with, some self-love or even just some tolerance, right? And some gentleness, the more we can grow in ourselves. And what others see is what others see. They are allowed to have their perceptions of us, but we know who we are. And hopefully your relationships can be built on trust and on character quality over what appearances there are. So that's kind of where I'm going to end it. I really have to use the restroom, so I'm ending it a little shorter than I anticipated, but I hope some of this was beneficial. And like I said before, in the notes below, you'll find the PDF for this, these modules. There's a ton of modules. There's a lot more on like the resolution and stuff. And I'm going to do more in the future. I'm not going to do all of them, but I will do more of this in the future if it's something that might be helpful. And I didn't get to it because I didn't have time to write it down, but there is a guided meditation that I think would be really helpful too, that I might do in the next one. I will be streaming again, hopefully Friday. I don't know if I'll have time tomorrow, but probably Friday. And I'm going to be doing a reading from The Women Who Run with Wolves. So looking forward to that. Please hit the like button if you liked this video. If you want to help support me having coffee and horrible, bad for me sodas for my streams, my PayPal is down there too. But I hope you women take care, take a deep breath, hydrate, and relax.